Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Bases Loaded right here on OTF. I'm Blake Munroe, where I'm joined weekly by Jeff Howe and CJ Vogel. And, guys, I got to say, I'm glad we did this on a Friday instead of Thursday when the series began, because it gives us something really good to talk about. How about Texas being the SEC champs outright after last night's victory over Oklahoma?
I'm glad I only had to root for Tennessee to win one baseball game. I'll say that much.
Man, okay, what a year so far, right? You know, first off, congratulations, Jim Schlossnagle, the staff, and obviously the team. But, you know, I remember sitting here about, 4 months ago, Jeff and Blake, and we sat here just wondering what a good year would be for Texas. And, you know, that conversation of being in the position to host a regional, right? Being a top 15, 16 team in the country was kind of where I landed is, you know, you get an opportunity to host a regional. Who knows what happens in the supers? Perhaps you host that. You know, I'm not going to say Omaha was the expectation. I know it always is at Texas. But in year one under a brand new coach, I mean, it's tough to put that level of expectation on a team in which you just don't know, especially on the mound, especially with some of these guys coming in out of the portal, some young guys needing to fill some big roles. But, hey, it's May 16th, and, you know, Jim Schlossnagle already with the trophy in a case, and that's pretty impressive.
I mean, to lose Jared Spencer, not even midway through conference play, you know, you're without Max Belyeu for 2/3 of the season, maybe even more. You've had all kinds of injuries. Mendoza's been hurt. Rodriguez has been hurt. To have all the injuries they've had and to be sitting here with an outright SEC title in year one surpassed my wildest expectations for what I thought this team could do. So congrats to Schloss and the staff and the players and everybody. Hey, they don't put that number on the outfield wall with the big numbers, but they still put that banner up outside the stadium. So it'll say 2025 SEC champions forever over at Dish Falk. So it's a hell of an accomplishment. And, you know, Schloss even said it after the game on Thursday. Winning the SEC is harder than winning the national championship. And I understood what he said, because to grind it out for 10 weeks and to come out on top in the conference standings and still to clinch an outright title with 2 games to go and to do it in Norman makes it even sweeter. I mean, I couldn't ask for more from this first season. Now, again, the expectation, CJ, like you said, they're always to get to Omaha and to do well in Omaha. They're always high at Texas, but I think this just sends a message to the rest of the conference that, hey, you may have heard about the tradition of Texas baseball, A&M, Arkansas. Some of you, to an extent, may be familiar with it. Now, as much as we talk about the football program at Texas, and it's great, this is the big dog on campus of the big three. And Texas is here to compete for championships. As long as Jim Schlossnagle is the head coach, that's exactly what Texas is going to do.
Yeah, and that's now 9 conference titles, of course, for the Longhorns, fellas. And only Texas and Georgia can claim the SEC baseball championship in their first year in the league. So, as we talked about, quite a feat. One of the other storylines yesterday, and you mentioned it, Jeff, Max Belyeu returning. I'm going to put a little clip up of his shot heard around the world, as they said on the Texas baseball Twitter here. But, guys, I mean, this seems to have come at the right time. Texas offense was a little stagnant over the last couple of weeks. How big is his return for Texas?
I think it's massive. I mean, you're getting the reigning Big 12 player of the year back in the lineup. I mean, anytime you can add a bat like that, it's huge. And also, as we saw last night, anytime you can add a glove like that into your outfield, I think it's also massive. But, you know, it was one of those games for Max Belyeu going into that 9th inning. You know, his first 3 at-bats, 3 strikeouts. I know Weatherspoon's a heck of a pitcher for Oklahoma. But it was one of those situations where you just kind of had to ease it back in for Max Belyeu. And ultimately, credit to Schloss, credit to the training staff as well to get him back and prepared to play before the postseason. Because I have more confidence that obviously his at-bats will grow, that his confidence will grow. That last night in the 9th inning, that certainly helps. But to get that feeling back, to get some live ABs in real, you know, meaningful situations before the postseason, I think that's huge for Max Belyeu and his confidence, kind of just how familiar he is in the box once again. But, yeah, getting him back in the lineup after scoring 17 runs in the last 6 SEC games, that's huge. It's huge. It's an instant spark. It's an instant possible, rally igniter. I think it's a massive addition to the lineup, and it gives me a lot more confidence in what this team could accomplish even without Jared Spencer on the hill.
I love what Schloss said to Keith Moreland post-game after the game on Thursday. So they didn't worry about Max. He rolls out of the rack in the morning. He's ready to hit. It's just a matter of him getting healthy. And even though he's looking like, vintage Barry Bonds with all that armor on the right arm, no, it's great. I think the thing it does, guys, is it takes pressure off of the guys behind him in the lineup. You move Galvan down. You saw everybody, there were still some strikeouts. First off, tip of the cap to Kyson Witherspoon, because that dude, I've just seen the numbers from afar. I haven't watched a ton, hardly any of Oklahoma this year, but he's as legit. We've seen Kate Anderson and every good pitcher in this league. He's one of, if not the best. So he's a hell of an arm. But, I felt like everybody swung a little freer, didn't feel as tense. ABs were more competitive than they were in the Florida series, even against Witherspoon. Look, once they got Witherspoon out of the game, the dam kind of broke a little bit. But even when it was Witherspoon, I felt like guys compete a little bit more. So hopefully this allows, you can get to me going forward for the rest of the weekend and in the SEC tournament. Can you get Jalen Flores going? Can Adrian Rodriguez, who had a really big game on Thursday, can this be the start of him really finding his groove again and getting Mendoza back to where he was before the injury? Kimball Schuessler had 2 hits, including a really big timely hit late in that game. So I love everything that Max Belyeu brings to the table, but kind of what we saw in the Thursday game, it's that potential that if you've got runners on base in a tight game in the late innings, he's got the potential to drive one out. And I think with 418 was the distance, man, that thing was a freaking tank he hit on Thursday.
And to add to that, Jeff, I'm sure that's not a guy that opposing pitchers wants to face, right? You don't want to see a Max Belyeu in the lineup, and you certainly don't want to face a Rylan Galvan with him on base, or Will Gasparino with multiple guys on base, right? You see what I'm saying here, but it just adds to the depth of this lineup, and that ultimately means a ton, especially when you see what Tommy Farmer's starting to do more consistently in the back end of the lineup. Look, he's just a tick below a 400 OPB or OBP. So really, really starting to turn it on. And clutch hits last night, of course, he was kind of the storyline of that Thursday game, of course, before the 9th inning 3-run bomb by Belyeu. But all in all, Texas finding ways to win has always been the storyline of this season, and it was exemplified again last night.
100%. Before we move on, I need to tell everybody about one of our sponsors today. That's Chinook Seedery. They have the best small batch seeds that you can find out there. 8 delicious flavors. You're going to find one that you absolutely love. Be sure to go online, check them out, chinookseedery.com, or, of course, you can find them in your favorite store. But be sure to grab you a bag of Chinook, whether you're watching the game or you're playing the game. Okay, well, we had this conversation off camera recently, guys, and Texas obviously gets the win. The past 2 weeks didn't really go the way they wanted. How important is it for Texas to either sweep the series or win this series for momentum going forward? You see that SEC tournament down there that starts on May 20th. Obviously, Texas gets a 2-round bye there, but not only for that, but for the regionals, the super, just period, in the immediate future. Why is this weekend so important?
To me, I think it's more the most important thing is figure out your pitching plan. And in case anybody didn't know, the SEC tournament, everybody gets in, all 16 teams are in it, single elimination. And with you getting the double bye into the quarters, start next Thursday, Cade Bing wasn't great, but he pitched well enough that the game never got out of hand while he was on the mound. I thought Grayson Saunier was really good on Thursday. So whether you want to go with Saunier, Grubbs, whoever it is, if you want to go with them on Thursday and take your chances and then, flip it back to Riojas on Friday and then, Saturday, Sunday, however you want to do it, hey, by all means, go for it. But I think it's really important to set up your pitching. And I don't want to say winning is inconsequential, but make sure your pitching staff is right. Their roles are defined, and see if this lineup can continue to have competitive at-bats. I feel like with Kyson Witherspoon out of the way, I like their chances to take the series now. And I feel like the pressure's got to be off. Like there's literally nothing else for you to accomplish in the regular season. You're the outright conference champions. I think you've got a top 8 locked up at this point. If the SEC regular season champion doesn't get a top 8, then what are we even doing here? Yeah. So I think you're good. It's all about just getting yourself ready for the regional.
Yeah, I think on top of that, it's just confidence and momentum. Baseball's a really streaky game, especially at the plate. And if you're seeing the ball well, if your lineup's putting up a lot of runs, that's something that carries over. That confidence, regardless of where you're playing, will carry over. Now, Texas 7 runs felt like it was 100 last night, and I know 3 of those came in the final inning. But point being, you won a big game against a big-time pitcher on the road. That's going to carry over. Now, again, these next 2 guys for Oklahoma, talented. They're not guys from Weatherspoon. So, to your point, Jeff, I think Texas should be in a position to win the series. And, again, it should be a more free mentality at the plate. Hey, go up there, get your hacks, get a good approach, go out there, execute your game plan coming into the game, and then move into the postseason. And I'm all for it. It's exciting, again, to know that maybe they're not pushing or stressing or forcing as much at the plate, knowing that the SEC regular season title is locked up. But got to have some sort of momentum. If you take this series, if you sweep Oklahoma this weekend, you have all the momentum in the world going into the postseason, especially when you swept Oklahoma and Texas A&M in the same year.
And real quick on the SEC tournament, so I've got the bracket pulled up right now. So Texas is the 1 seed. Their first game will be Thursday, roughly 3:00. If they win in advance, they wouldn't play again until Saturday at noon. So one of 2 things is going to happen. Either you get the 1 game in and you go home and get the extra rest, or you get the win and then you get another day to rest your bullpen. So either way, you'll be sitting really, really good as far as your pitching staff goes.
Yeah. And talking about that top 8 seed, I was just looking, fellas, D1 baseball, of course, they have their field of 64 projections, and they got Texas, and this was updated 2-3 days ago at the most. They got Texas as that number 1 overall, with Dallas Baptist, who we all know can be a dangerous team, as the 2nd. UTRGV as the 3rd, and Oral Roberts as the 4th. I'd take that.
Yeah, a familiar foe in UTRGV right there. Of course, they've had a heck of a season on the back end, but that's what is always so interesting about the SEC is you look across the aisle and what you could be faced up with, and a super, and you see Tennessee as the 2 in an opposite region. All right, game on. But I think for Texas, if that's your regional, I think you like it.
No doubt. Typically the way the NCAA does it, they'll try to get some local teams in there, if possible, some area teams, regional teams. So yeah, that's cool. I just the more you think about it, guys, I wouldn't want, if I'm any of these regional hosts, if I'm one of those, especially outside of the top 8, like if I'm, let's say, if I'm West Virginia as a 16, and the last thing I want to see is Tennessee as to my region. NC State, hell no, I don't want to see Florida, even though, Florida, they did suffer a pretty big injury losing Heyman for the year. They lost Luke Heyman on Thursday. So that's a really, really tough blow for them. But at any rate, man, that's cool. Hey, there's nothing quite like postseason baseball at the Dish, even though, if you play a midday game in the middle of the day, that turf's going to be hot enough to fry an egg on, but there's nothing quite like postseason at the Dish.
Yeah, especially recently where it's 107 on Wednesday out here in Austin. Have fun.
And, looking at this real quick, 6 of the 7 top seeds, guys, SEC schools. So, if that doesn't tell you how tough this conference is, 75% of your top 8 are SEC schools. That's insane to me. But we saw it reflected all year long in the top 25s that we followed throughout the season.
Yeah, and again, it just kind of speaks to the year so far had by Texas. You see how they're ranked nationally, and for Texas to come away with a regular season crown, it's a heck of a team. Now, of course, postseason means a little bit more, of course, but really successful first season under Schlossnagle.
Yeah, if you're talking about, in a 16-team league, can the SEC get 13 teams into the tournament? I think at this point, A&M was kind of on that line, last 4 in, first 4 out for some people. the way that Georgia series started for them, and obviously, when this goes up, we'll see how the weekend ends. But it's looking like the Aggies probably need to win the SEC tournament to get the automatic bid. But, I mean, you get 12, 13 teams in from a 16-team league. That's really freaking good.
I'm adding it up right now. Yep, they have 13.
Mm-hmm.
It's what they have in that field of 64. So you're spot on there. That's just incredible.
Yeah, by the way, speaking of A&M, A&M got swept by Missouri, which I think if you get swept by the last place team in the league, that should probably and you're on the bubble, that should probably do you in. Missouri gave up 25 runs in their Thursday game to Mississippi State. And that's a Mississippi State team that's, that's on the bubble fighting for their lives. So, yeah, that's sorry, Aggies. That's the team that swept you, that just gave up, I don't know how you want to figure that's 3 touchdowns and a couple safeties, but yeah, it's it was rough.
That's crazy.
So there you go. Yep, you're right. First 4 out, A&M, and I'd imagine after this weekend, it's just out for sure. So one thing I wanted to ask y'all today, and we were asked this on Coffee and Football, so I'm curious to get y'all's answer. I wrote it down as soon as the question was asked, and I was like, I'm saving this for bases loaded. And I can't remember who it is, credit to whoever it was on Coffee and Football. They said, if Texas doesn't make the College World Series, would it take the shine off this season? How would you rate the season? Would you consider this season a failure of sorts? What does that do if Texas doesn't make the College World Series? And my answer, I'll go ahead and tell y'all, is, we look back at the beginning of the season and we called it, I said it would be a successful season if Texas hosted a regional. Like, I didn't really have I had expectations, but not super high ones. And so they've definitely exceeded my expectations. And obviously there's a lot of baseball left to be played, but I wouldn't say it would suck given the recent success and winning the SEC and everything. Don't get me wrong, but I definitely wouldn't call it a failure by any means.
Yeah, I don't think any season in which you can add a number to the stadium is a failure, right? Texas will do just that with the SEC regular season crown. So in my eyes, no. It would suck, to your point, Blake. It would kind of take away from that achievement. But again, you got to remember, baseball's a fickle game, right? You never know what might happen on a given afternoon in a single double elimination setup. So it would be unfortunate, but it's one of those things where going back to the preseason expectations and seeing how the season has progressed, those expectations obviously change, right? Those goalposts move as a result of the play on the field. And so obviously what we started at as the expectation for this season, that's certainly changed and is probably in a different stratosphere from what we thought, given what we've seen over the last, 60 games or so. So yeah, it would be upsetting in terms of what the current expectations are, but preseason-wise, I think that they've shattered every expectation. They've shattered every goal. They've achieved what I believe is more than I could have imagined coming into this season, but that's different now, right? The standard at Texas is to dogpile in Omaha, right? And that's the only time that you'll ever do it. So it would be a rough end to what had been a very strong season. Ultimately, though, I don't think, because you've already achieved, putting up a new number on the stadium, I don't think you can call it a failure for that.
No, you can't call it a failure. You can be, there's a tendency, I think, sometimes to CJ, I think you put it very well. And I'll back you up by saying there's a tendency, I think, we as sports fans have sometimes to throw the baby out with the bathwater, for lack of a better term. The season can still be a success. It can still be something to remember, even if it doesn't end, with another national championship at Texas. Here's and what both you guys said, and CJ, you said it well. Relative to our own preseason expectations, and I'd ask this for anybody out there pondering this: what were your expectations for this team going into the season? And my expectations in the preseason, I was with you guys. I said, hey, if you get in a position where you can host and you end up hosting a regional, then it was a pretty good year one for Schloss. Now, obviously, winning the SEC changes that a little bit, but you look across the college baseball landscape, man, there's not a team like, I don't even think there's a team like Tennessee or A&M last year. There's definitely not a team like LSU 2 years ago with Skeens and Cruz and Tommy Tanks and that whole crew. I think back to other successful Texas seasons that ended without a national championship. You can go back and look at some of those teams in the 80s, but I think like 2010, where Texas ended up losing it, I think probably the second best team in terms of talent Augie Garrido had, right next to 2004, which you talk about another disappointing end to a season. But, they lost to a TCU team coached by Jim Schlossnagle in a super regional at Disch-Falk. And you think about it, they had a great year. They won the Big 12. You can argue they were the best team in the country. It wasn't a failure, but you can definitely be disappointed. You think back to 2021, you win the Big 12 title, you go to Omaha. Texas was the second best team in the country that year. I really think they were. The problem was they just couldn't win a winner-take-all semifinal against the team that was the best team in the country, and that was Mississippi State, who ended up winning the national championship. So I think it's all about how you look at it, but by no means you can't win the SEC regular season title outright and call your season a failure. I won't stand for that. That's ridiculous.
Yeah, no doubt about it. It's been a fun ride, regardless of how it ends, guys. Well, before we get to our last couple of things, I need to tell everyone about our other sponsor, and that's Tackle Addict. Are you an avid fisherman who's always searching for the right supplies? Do yourself a favor, check out tackleaddict.com. It's owned and operated by former Longhorn Brian Robinson and former Longhorn baseball great Brandon Belt. Tackle Addict has everything you need for the best in today's fishing equipment, and it's for the everyday fisherman and serious pros alike. Get their product shipped directly to you from the shores of Lake Sam Rayburn. That's Tackle Addict, ADDICT.com, and Brian and Brandon say hook 'em. Well, all throughout the season, I've asked y'all different things like, who do you think the MVP is, yada, yada, yada. But looking back at the regular season, almost now in the books, who's been the most surprising player? Who caught you off guard? Maybe you didn't have expectations for, whatever it may be. Who has really wowed you this season that you didn't expect to wow you?
I'll go with the two young kids. Dylan Volantis has had one of the best seasons ever for a freshman pitcher in the SEC. And I said it on here. I said it on any of the live streams we were on. I wasn't expecting Jonah Williams to play anything remotely resembling a significant role for this team. And for him to head into the postseason as a starter in the outfield, yeah, Jonah Williams has surpassed my expectations. I don't know if you got anybody else, CJ, but I would point to those two. If I'm picking a pitcher and a position player, it'd be Jonah Williams and Dylan Volantis.
Yeah, I was going to go Volantis as my number one guy. I mean, you see the numbers right there. He's if he doesn't receive some sort of postseason SEC accolade for what he's achieved this season, I don't know. I don't know. You might have to storm the SEC HQ. So I would also go a little bit. Adrian Rodriguez has been in that conversation for me. This is a freshman guy, infielder that's played a lot of different positions. He's battled some injuries, but still hitting north of 300. He's got a on-base percentage, north of 400 as well. But I'll even add Ethan Mendoza because I feel like every time Texas gets a rally going at the beginning of games, he's the one on base. He's the one kind of igniting it. And, it's not an easy job to lead off games, especially when, offenses go cold. But I'm looking at Ethan Mendoza hitting 328. He's got 5 homers on the year, 31 RBIs, slugging 479 out of that top spot. I'm a fan of his, and I think Texas fans are very fortunate to have him for multiple years. But absolutely, about 4 or 5 weeks into the season, I think is when everybody realized, okay, this is a dude needs to be treated as such, and to move up into that leadoff spot. I think the Texas lineup greatly benefited from his at bats and the way that he was able to produce. That's been a very welcome surprise for me, and I think Texas fans again very fortunate to get him for multiple seasons.
I'll give you one more, just in terms of we need to give him his flowers because I don't think he gets enough love. You guys realize Kimball Schuessler's hitting 324 in SEC play after the Thursday game. Got 5 home runs in SEC play. The walk, the strikeout numbers. Now you look at he and Rylan Galvan. The big difference between the two is Schuessler's only walked 7 times. Galvan's got 21 walks. So that's why Galvan's OPS is 1032. Schuessler's OPS right now is 887. But still, a veteran hitter. We forget, man, we didn't know who was going to be the regular first baseman, and I wasn't 100% sure that move was going to work out. I definitely didn't think it was going to work out the way it has with him being really solid defensively at first base. But the fact that, he's hitting over 300, and I guess unless he just has an un-Kimball like meltdown over these last 2 games. Going to end the regular season hitting over 300 in conference play. Really, really good year for Kimball Schuessler.
Yeah, power came on late.
Yep.
My pick was Valantis as well, so I'm with you. If he doesn't win Freshman of the Year, something, that kid deserves something. There ain't no doubt about it.
Well, if it makes you guys feel better, for the College Baseball Writers Association, I did give him an All-American nod, and he and Rylan Galvan in my on my ballot for the first round of voting for the Dick Hauser Trophy. So
there you go. Good stuff.
I did my part.
Oh, all right. Well, we talked baseball. I do want to make one softball note here. Of course, the regionals have already started for Mike White and his team. They're playing when this airs against Eastern Illinois. Then they play the winner of UCF Michigan tomorrow, assuming they win, obviously, on that one. But good luck to Coach White and his squad.
They're going to bring Tony Romo to throw down the first pitch for Texas and Eastern Illinois.
Oh, man.
Jimmy Garoppolo going to come down to be the honorary captain. I'm trying to work my way through Eastern Illinois quarterbacks, and it's a very short list.
I was about to say, if you can name any more besides those 2, I would be impressed off the top of your head.
Sean Payton's isn't Sean Payton an Eastern Illinois guy, or Mike Shanahan, one of the 2, or maybe both?
Might as well just look. Yeah, Sean Payton, 3-time Associated Press All-American quarterback at East. I never knew that. Played professionally in 87, following his 4 seasons at Eastern Illinois from 82 to 86.
That's it. That's the list. That's all I got.
Oh, man, good stuff. All right, well, the Longhorns put game 2 tonight against Oklahoma at 6:30. Be sure to check that out. Of course, we'll be back next Friday as well. And guys, I'm gonna go ahead and warn you, we've been getting asked a lot once regionals start to do a live stream. A lot of people weighing in on that, so we may have to start that up before too long instead of a pre-recorded one, at least one for everybody.
Well, I tell you what, we're just a little on-air planning. Memorial Day is when the bracket gets revealed, so we may go live after the selection show.
Hey, that's a great idea, Jeff. That's a phenomenal idea.
I have 1 or 2 of those every now and then.
That's why you get paid the big bucks, man.
I'm one of those like the Hollywood creative guys. I'll throw 30 ideas at the wall. 28 of them will be terrible, but those 1 or 2 that stick will be. They might work.
Well, we will be back next Friday. Thank you all for tuning in. Be sure to hit that like and subscribe button, ring the bell so you're notified anytime we post content, whether it's football, baseball, basketball, whatever it may be. And don't forget to head on over to ontexasfootball.com. We got discussion not only about football, but all the sports going on over there. If you're not a member, become one easily. Sign up using promo code OTFOG, and I'll save you a little cash. You can lock in an annual subscription for just $49.95, but only if you use promo code OTFOG.
Hey, Blake, just real quick.
Yeah.
Last thing I got to say, in the words of my buddy Greg Swindell, to everybody in the SEC, all of their 15 members, remember, folks, always the horns go up.
For Jeff Howe and CJ Vogel, I'm Blake Munroe, and we'll see you next time.